Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Patmos, and it is August the 6th, 2026, and I'm going to be addressing some follow up issues about the terrible events in Spokane, a catastrophic wildfire that has impacted that area. For those of you who may not know who I am a board certified internal medicine physician. I am licensed in Washington State, as well as Oregon, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and California. That entire area of the country, the Mountain West and Pacific Northwest, is where I am licensed to practice medicine, and I still see patients from all of those states. So I have a vested interest in the public health aspects of this situation. For those of you who don't know, a massive wildfire, a number of wildfires, has engulfed the Spokane area, burned thousands upon thousands of acres, and has now, as of this morning, destroyed something close to 900 structures, most of which are homes. Most of North Spokane is under a mandatory evacuation. We're not talking about areas that are out in the forest or out in the rural areas. We're talking about residential neighborhoods with shopping centers and busy streets, schools, etc. Only a few miles from downtown Spokane. This is the prime residential district on the north side of Spokane is under a mandatory evacuation. 65,000 people have been evacuated. The fires are not contained. They made a little bit of progress in the last 24 hours, but hot weather and winds are forecast to return in the next couple of days. This fire is by no means over, and the impact on the area is by no means over. Um, Now, the aspect that I want to talk about today is the fact that there is an enormous difference in the way this fire is being managed, specifically around the communication, um, compared to the fire in Maui. Now, for those of you who don't know, I lived in Spokane for many years. I have a very fond place in my heart for that community. I have a lot of friends there, and I have some wonderful memories from that area. And I owned a home in Spokane that is, looking at the map, probably one of the ones that burned to the ground. I also lived on Maui for over 5 years and was there during the terrible fires that hit Maui in August 2023, almost a year ago, almost 3 years ago to the day. I still own a home on Maui, and I know very much about a lot about what happened to Maui and how Maui has responded to and dealt with their fires there. And there is a huge difference between how Spokane is reacting and how Maui is reacting. And what is the difference? Well, it has nothing to do with the efforts to put out the fire. They're doing a yeoman job, and the federal government is helping with firefighters and the efforts to control the fires, put out the fires, and evacuate people. I have no complaints about that. Here's the difference. The difference isn't in that; it's in the communication around the hazmat toxic exposure that this fire represents. One of the things that was made very, very clear immediately after the Maui fire is that the ash and the debris from the Maui fire is a hazmat situation. It's a toxic waste dump, basically. That ash, that debris is loaded with carcinogens and other toxic chemicals. And the federal government was very vigorous, very upfront, very active, very proactive in stopping people from going into those burned out areas because they would be exposed to these toxic chemicals. That was communicated early and often, and federal officials were all over that aspect of it. That is not the case with Spokane. In Spokane, the messaging has been largely, almost entirely, coming from state and local officials who've talked about the fire, evacuation, fire suppression, and so forth. Um, and the evacuation. There's been little communication about the hazmat aspects of this fire. One news source in Spokane did run a story about this last night, but generally there has been very little coming from anybody about the hazmat aspects of this. In striking contradistinction to what happened in Maui, the federal government has said nothing. Donald Trump has said nothing publicly about this fire that has impacted a major city in the United States and it directly harmed tens of thousands of people. The president has had nothing to say about it publicly. EPA has had nothing to say about this publicly. They're not saying anything at all about the hazmat aspects of it. FEMA is there and involved with helping with the evacuation and the fire, but has said nothing at all about helping to house the displaced people. My biggest concern is that from a public health standpoint, there's been no communication from Health and Human Services, no communication from Secretary of Health Robert Kennedy Jr., no communication from CDC. This is a major public health issue. That's my concern and the point of my video today. I want to say it again. This is a major public health issue, and it's a public health issue in two distinct um, ways. One, there's toxic ash and debris all over Spokane now, and people who are going to go back to those areas to look for what they can salvage from their burned out homes, or maybe they're going back to a home that wasn't burned but is downwind from or next to a house that was burned. Their exposure is a risk to toxic chemicals. But not only that, it's also in the air. These fires aerosolize and vaporize materials like batteries and PVC piping and asbestos insulation and other insulation, all sorts of building materials and so forth that get caught up in these fires and become aerosolized and are suspended in the air with the smoke. That smoke is all over the entire area of Spokane and it is drifting eastward into Idaho and then ultimately into Montana. This smoke represents a public health risk. There's been no comment, nothing said from any officials on the federal level about this compared to Maui, which had a very, very different kind of communication. I can't emphasize this enough. The communication difference is striking, and what it tells me is that Spokane and the public health aspects of this are not top of mind. I don't even think the federal government is even aware of what's going on. There's been so many cuts and so much downsizing to EPA, and all the priorities have been changed at EPA that I'm not even sure that the federal government is not only not communicating about this, they're not really even aware of it. Where is Robert Kennedy, the man who's talking constantly about chemicals and autism and so forth? He has nothing to say about this. Here we have a toxic plume of smoke over the entire state of Washington and much of the Pacific Northwest, and he has nothing to say about it. This is public health. This is exactly what Health and Human Services should be addressing. There should be a vigorous communication strategy from the federal government to warn people and to prevent people from venturing back into this hazmat zone, but also to educate people about the contaminants in the smoke and the risk to public health, not just with in terms of exacerbation of asthma and acute COPD, acute stuff, but more long-term stuff. There are toxins now and carcinogens that have been burned and are suspended in the air all over that whole area. This is a major public health issue, and it's not being addressed at all. So I would hope that somebody would wake up, set the alarm, wake up. Sorry if I caught you napping, but you got a big public health problem on your hands here in the Pacific Northwest, Mr. Trump and Mr. Kennedy, and you need to do something about that.